What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fox Wolf Mr. GLOAT podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today, guys, I have 5 topics. The first topic is I'm going to do, instead of doing the camera phone like this, I'm actually going to do my iPhone like this. Instead of doing it like this, just hold it the other way, sideways. I'm just going to do it like it's a YouTube short video, but yet again, guys, just to save up time and space so I can see what I'm looking at, but that's not really important right now. But that is the first topic, so maybe it's important to talk about that now than later. But, guys, to be honest, guys, the second topic I would like to talk about, it's a bummer, guys. There's a lot of upset victories here, ladies and gentlemen. And for the last few days, ever since I did my last podcast a few days ago, it is June the 10th, ladies and gentlemen. I will say, though, there's a lot of surprising victories here. I've already talked about Brandon Moore defeating Stanley Wright by a technical decision for his IBF USBA heavyweight title by when Brandon Moore got injured by headbutt against Stanley Wright, and they had to wave the fight off, but they were in America. But the real story takes place in June the 7th in 2 countries, one in Hamburg, Germany, and one in Suffolk, UK. Yes, Suffolk. Not Kersey, but it is in Suffolk. United Kingdom, near the Portman Road football ground. We had a couple great big fights, ladies and gentlemen, where Nelson Heisa retained his WBO European heavyweight title in a round 2 TKO win against a guy that didn't really have much of a career in his point. There's nothing much about this 41-year-old German fighter named Patrick Corti. He is ranked number 412 right now, but only God knows where he was ranked at the time, because technically we don't know. Like, Patrick Corti already did lost his last fight last year ago against Tyson Fury's brother. And he took on a journeyman jobber months later by the end of that year. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. Mike Perez managed to score out a great win for him. He's still barely in the rankings, but I do think Mike Perez isn't really at a prime that he should be, but we'll see what he does. And as for the Olympian, Lewis Richardson got a great 6-round points decision to pick up his first win after his 2024 Olympic bronze medal, so that's good. That is not bad for a start. Also, guys, I also like to point out Nelson Heisa, considering Nelson Heisa is 40 years old, 23 wins, 21 knockouts. He's ranked number 28 in the heavyweight. Decides to call out ranked number 30 in BoxRec, Moses Atama. I do question that for hilariousness, because this might be, like, don't get me wrong, guys, like, even though Nelson Heisa is ranked 2 spots higher than Moses Atama, which means if Moses Atama picks up this win, which is 100% of an easy win for him, then that is just going to be another great step up for him to go higher in the ranks. Like, that would be crazy. It is ridiculous because, like, Heisa has been in boxing for 3 years, but he started when he was like 36 or 37 years old. Yeah, 37 years old. So it just goes to show you of a guy that's 21 years older than Moses Atama. He's 40 years old, 41 years, 40 years old, taking on Moses Atama. That is ridiculous. Don't get me wrong, WBO, European, that would be something for a record to put on in Moses Atama's record to win that title. Not bad, but I do question that as a funny joke for me to talk about, because it's like, that's just out of the realm of craziness, because, like I said before, Heisa and Moses Atama are 20 years apart of each other. So, and even though I've been pointing out Nelson Heisa for a while, but yet again, it surprises me that Nelson has the heart, like this unknown quantity that I have known for the last full year after he was in a great record, because I only knew about uh, Nelson Heisa, back when he actually won an undefeated fighter back in April of 2024 when he was like 16-0 before June of 2024 last year ago. So I've known him with interesting wins since. But yet again, Moses Atama, it's going to be a clear win for him. But speaking about clear win, guys, there is one other fight on this card that's really controversial. Considering referee John Latham did what he had to do with Nelson Heisa's fight that same night, John Latham had 2 fights that year, or that night. And his second fight was the last for a main event where Justice Hooney was completely demolishing Fabio Wardley, and halfway through the 10th round, with all scorecards being cleared by the judges favoring Justice Hooney, with Wardley getting tired, sets up this amazing punch, brings down Justice Hooney. And he's barely stumbling a little bit. He's looking at the referee, waiting for the count, or so I thought, because the camera has it cut outside of the ring where it shows Fabio Wardley covering the whole screen of Justice Hooney, and then it cuts to Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn's reaction outside, and then it cuts to John Latham waving the fight off. People said that he waved the fight off, even though on BoxRec and Live stated that Hooney was counted out, when in reality, some people thought, but even though he was down on the ground for like 10 and a half seconds or 11 seconds for Hooney, depending on the time of the fight, but people did say that maybe the referee was counted too fast. It's almost similar to Deontay Wilder knocking out Tyson Fury in the first fight in the 12th round, or even when he knocked him down in round 4 in the third fight, and the referee was counting so slow that Fury was down for like 11 or 12 seconds. We finally got back up, and then 7 rounds later, he defeated Deontay Wilder, when in reality, Wilder would have also won that fight because of knockout. So, yeah, seeing that is questioned, and I feel bad for Hooney. A lot of fans voted that Hooney wouldn't win, but it just goes to show you that you gotta learn from the basis. Even though Fabio Wardley isn't really much of an amateur fighter than Hooney, and people do say that you do pick up a lot of bad habits when it comes to amateur fighting, which is why people also believe that even after Hooney got knocked out in a sparring fight at one point before in sparring, they believe that maybe he had no chance. And well, he did got knocked down in this fight, but yeah, I do question Fabio Wardley. Good luck if he does get a good chance for a title win here, but I'm even questioning if Lawrence Okali can do the same thing. All we know is it's going to be interesting. But speaking about interesting, guys, considering that that was a great upset moment, the real story came where in Germany, Morad Ali from France, trying to become the next fighter to take over for Tony Yoka after he failed to represent France. Morad Ali put out an interesting performance last night, a few days ago, against EBU European champion Labinot Haksozav. Labinot was already in an underdog victory for that EBU title, and now he won the WBC International Silver Heavyweight title in a 12-round fight, which I still don't know the scorecards as of today. I can't find the scores yet, but it does say Labinot won the fight. As right now, Morad Ali is now ranked number 53 as we speak. Labinot is 25. Oh, yeah, and Fabio Wardley is ranked number 5, and Justice Hooney number 23 after this fight, after their fights happened. So keep that in mind. They were top 10 that night, but not anymore, because Wardley's top 5 and top 25 for Hooney. Labinot, ladies and gentlemen, I really don't know what to say about him. 32 years old. He's boxed out for 9 good years, so he's finally in the ranks for this, but I am going to see what happens as looking up Box Live for the heck of it, considering that's the end of the second topic, quite frankly. But yet again, there has been no update since, so we don't know when the IBF or WBC will be updating their 15 rankings, or neither did WBO, so we'll get to that soon when that time comes. Anyway. All right. So as for reports, guys, for the third topic, ladies and gentlemen, as for the heavyweight, fighters are already done as we speak. As speaking forward, ladies and gentlemen, on June the 8th, ladies and gentlemen, Junto Nakatani. Now it's time to get to the non-heavyweight fights. Junto Nakatani put out a round 6 cornerman retirement fight against the IBF World Bantamweight Champion Ryosuke Nishida. It was a great win, and considering Nishida did put out some surprising moments in the fight, like where he did set off a little bit of a round 3 and a round 4 basis, which I thought round 3 and round 4 were interesting rounds that would have been a little bit scored good for Nishida, and which I do believe they were great rounds. Like Junto did have problems in some rounds, but even after round 5 and round 6, the scores were like 58-55 by 2 judges and 159-55, or 58-56 by 2. But I did believe that some other Japanese boxers were going to have some interesting feel to it, because at this moment, I'm not saying that Nakatani is ready for his run. Like, I do believe, like, even though he's been boxed for now 10 years in pro, and I do see a good 10 more years in him, like, I already believe I even have an interesting run for anyone else when it comes to Naoya Inoue, because Naoya Inoue's boxed since 2012 for the last 13 years in his career, and he's 30-0 with 27 knockouts. So consider that be done, but that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy hit, swing, and way back past Fenway Park, it's a home run. That baby is gone from the monster seats. I do see some interesting work cut out, but yet again, I don't really know. But yet again, it's possible that something might happen here. But I will say, though, there is going to be moments where I believe whoever might win this fight is going to make it big. But ladies and gentlemen, speaking about making it big, when it comes to a successful YouTuber trying to make it big in boxing, while his brother, a star on YouTube, being big in WWE, is boxing the son of a hype job of Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. on June the 28th, under the card of Floyd Schofield versus Telvin Farmer, and Holly Holm, former MMA and former boxing champion, is coming out of retirement after 12 years out of the ring, boxing against a 10-0 fighter that is more favorite than Holm. The preacher's daughter, I don't think I want to see her box again or even fight, because after her win against Ronda Rousey and then the rest of her MMA career was down the ground. Yeah, MMA fighting and female fighting, and Ronda Rousey's career dead from Amanda Nunes. Yeah, I really don't know what to say about that. That's just ridiculous. Also, Gilberto Ramirez is going to go against Junior Doticos for his WBO and WBA title. But yet again, guys, don't forget, even though there is some interesting fights like welterweight fighter Anvius Griffin, 17-0, taking on Julian Rodriguez, a 23-1 fighter. But like I said before, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., this hype job fighter, even though his father had a lot of record resumes in his career for having nobody fights, considering he is a former WBC middleweight champion, even one of the few middleweight champions back in the day in 2011, and he had some interesting title defenses against them until Sergio Martinez ended it in 2013 and had rematch fights against one fighter and lost against enough interesting fighters like Andrews Fonfera and then Canelo Alvarez in 2017, and that was the end of his career there. Losses against Daniel Jacobs 2 years later, and then the next year in 2020 in COVID, he lost a friggin' accidental headbutt technical decision against Abel Cesares, only to lose against Anderson Silva in Silva's third fight in 2021. He went against some guy, and then he never fought again, and came back against taking on a 1-0 fighter last year ago, and now he's fighting against Cesar Chavez is 39 years old, but if Chavez does win this fight, good for him. Because considering he's been boxing for 22 years right now, if he does get this fight since he started in 2003, and even though if Cesar Chavez does box for probably a few more years in 2028, probably similar than how his father, Cesar Chavez Sr., fought since 1980 to 2005 for 25 years, and Cesar Chavez does get something interesting in his final years in 2026 or so, and just gets luck factor or something, well, and then he might retire in 2028. Hey, if he picks up this win against Jake Paul and then maybe next year, who knows? So, hey, why not? I will say, though, he is ranked number 89 in the cruiserweight, with Jake Paul being ranked number 139 in the heavyweight, so I can see some interesting facts there. This is by Golden Boy Promotion, Oscar De La Hoya, and this is the undercard of all those fights, and this is the main event of Paul versus Chavez, so it's going to be interesting. It will be interesting to know who is going to pick up this win for the heck of it, because it's going to be really interesting. Interesting as enough fighters might pick up a win here. The final thing I like to point out, guys, in the non-heavyweight, before we get into it, guys, I'd just like to point that Yudai Shigeoko, considering Yudai Shigeoko lost his chance of fighting in a rematch against Melvin Jerusalem for the WBC World Minimum Weight Championship by utter failure, even when his brother Jinjiro Shigeoko failed to get a big victory into his career. Jinjiro also lost against a Philippines fighter as well that became a bust. Pedro Tundran, the IBF World Minimum Weight Champion, also in the Philippines, defeated Jinjiro Shigeoko last year ago. And at this moment, after the rematch and so, months ago, and then on May the 24th, and I just heard about this now, which is a few weeks ago, so I didn't know about this. Pedro Tundran defended his title with now 18 wins, 4 losses, and a draw. The Shigeoko brothers, in my opinion, in minimum weight boxing are dead. It's just sucks. And it sucks because Pedro Tundran and Melvin Jerusalem went to their country in Japan. And surprisingly, it is surprising because, for bad or not, because it wasn't a fluke, because at that time in Japan, in the first fight, Pedro Tundran did have judges at the time, such as they had an Australian judge, a French judge, and an Italian judge in that fight when it ended by round 9 TKO. and Pedro defeated him. This next fight that happened time ago, they had an American fighter, which favored Jinjiro to win. They had another judge, also from the Philippines, that favored their country. And then they had a Japanese judge named Natsuhiko Nakamura from Japan, and he favored it. The other two judges favored it 115 to 113, one for each. Nakamura favored the Philippine fighter to win by split decision, 118 to 110. And after all of that, Jinjiro was stretchered out due to a horrific head injury after the fight. Now, I forgot the information, but it stated that he might have had a huge something like, someone said that he might have had a little bit of a horrific problem of a brain surgery due to a problem that it was actually stated that the ICU stated in responding to voices after the brain surgery that he had to survive in the hospital. So for all of that, after all of that, it's just so bad to see this. Like, these Japanese boxers put their body on the line, and they were both Shigeoka brothers, and they failed to win their rematches against two Philippine fighters. It's just sad for me to talk about this, and I just hope Pedro Tundran gets a fight against Oscar Collazo to unify his titles, to see if he can put on a good show just for the heck of it, because that would be interesting. Because after Melvin Jerusalem already lost against Oscar Collazo about last year ago, mostly, when in 2023 for the WBO belt, when Oscar won, I don't think Melvin Jerusalem wants to have a rematch with him because he lost in round 7 by cornerman stoppage. But the scorecards were close, because after 7 rounds, the scores were 67 to 66 after that fight, when the fight was stopped after the end of the round. So I think it's going to give Melvin Jerusalem a bigger chance to get this match with Oscar Collazo. But I do want to see Melvin Jerusalem versus Pedro Tundran, both Philippine fighters, fighting for the IBF and WBC belt. While Oscar Collazo is WBO and WBA champion, I want to see that to one of those Philippine fighters hit each other, and whoever wins gets to fight against unified champion Oscar Collazo, and they can clash for the undisputed minimum weight championship, and also get awarded the minimum weight, lineal minimum weight title that has been gone since 1999 or so, since Ricardo Lopez retired and went up to the light flyweight in his final couple years, when he fought only 3 fights to retire undefeated. So, but for the last couple of decades, they're just, these countries are only fighting for one piece of a title and defending their titles a single time. So seeing Oscar Collazo, this guy is a huge murderous fighter. I don't want Oscar Collazo to move up to weight class. I think he should stay and wait until we get a chance for him to fight, because he's a 12-0, 9 knockout record. He's a southpaw fighter. He can, I do want to see some interesting moments with him and interesting stuff. And I do want to see that he has what it takes. But we'll see what happens. As for Nyamchong CP Freshmart knockout, he's already picked up 2 wins, one in April the 30th by his 10th knockout scored, and the WBC Asia minimum weight unanimous decision title he won May the 28th, about a few days after Jinjiro had to be suffering in a hospital due to the brain surgery. Yeah, Jinjiro Shigeoka is not going to box anymore. And as for Udai, I don't know if he will as well, because now the Shigeoka brothers' careers are going to die short. It's saying that they were going to be the next Klitschko brothers or Charlo brothers, but yeah, that's not going to happen. It is what it is. But anyway, it is going to be interesting to see if Nyamchong because Nyamchong, I just don't see him getting a good heads up for that. Like if he fights against Melvin Jerusalem or so because he is the Asia champion or so, that's just going to cause a hard problem for anyone else to fight against Oscar Collazo if they've already lost against him once. So, yeah, I do want to see something else about this, but yet again, it's probably best not to, because it just seems like Oscar Collazo will strip his titles and go to the next weight class. I don't see Oscar Collazo losing a fight for a while now, like probably 5 or 7 years from now. So he might pick up a good resume for his career until he loses his first fight. But I'm already seeing him being a big star in the division. And that's something that's really hard to be in the lower weight classes. It's that hard. So I hope Oscar Collazo does it, because I do see dangerousness. As a Puerto Rican fighter born in, well, as considering he is a Puerto Rican fighter, born in Newark, New Jersey, USA, keep that in mind, representing Puerto Rico, I will say, though, I feel like North America is a more dominant effort to take out all these Asian boxers in the minimum weight division. And that's something I do believe Oscar Collazo could do. So who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? So, for all reports stated, I will say with now everything out of sight, ladies and gentlemen, with all the knockouts, everything going on right now, I do like to point out mostly my fourth topic. So, guys, my fourth topic I will like to do is talk about my next episode of the Mr. GLOAT podcast. So, my next episode, ladies and gentlemen, will be the history of the women's division for light heavyweight. I've already done the road to the undisputed heavyweight championship. I've talked about June, it's like by the first week of June, second week. By January, I've already did that episode weeks before Clarissa Shields defeated Daniel Perkins last February to become undisputed champion. So it's like, yeah, it's almost like been 5 months, I guess, since that podcast happened. So I'm already going to do the history of the undisputed light heavyweight championship war in women's boxing and talk about the weight classes and such. I was going to think about talking about it in this episode, but you know what? There's not a lot of stuff for me to talk about in this episode of the Mr. GLOAT podcast now, because at this moment, I've already talked about everything I've already had to, but with everything going on, the real story is who is going to come out on top of the world. And that is a really hard thing to talk about when it comes to women's boxing. And in all fairness, there will be understanding when it comes to that. But yet again, there is things I do like to keep to myself. So it's probably best not to talk about it, because there is a lot of things I do want to talk about, but something is telling me I should keep a lot of this stuff to myself, because I've already said a lot of interesting things during my last episode, during the final 5 minutes when I talked about VTubers. And to be honest, I think it's probably best not to talk about anything about what I'm going to talk about. But when it comes to the light heavyweight division, I am going to point that out. Talk about all the championship and title bouts. And I am going to talk about another thing, such as like how I talked about the women's IBF or the IWBF, Women's International Boxing Federation, or the International Women's Boxing Federation, or even the IBA, Women's International Boxing Association, and even the IBA as well. That was legit back then. Even though those titles aren't major anymore for women's boxing, I still think they should be, because without those titles, women's boxing would have been dead a long time ago if it wasn't for the women's IBF or even the women's IBA or even the IWBF. So there is a lot of things I will talk about that in the episode, and after that, I will talk about all the 4 belts that have been fought in the light heavyweight. But to be honest, it might be a 30-minute long podcast because at this moment, I do like to keep my throat at minimum as best I can. But for now, due to all respect, without those titles, women's boxing would have been gone a long time ago and it would have never been popular. I'm not saying that women's boxing is not popular, but there is moments that I do enjoy some of the moments in boxing. But when it comes to the higher weight classes of women's boxing, I do question that. And ever since, because ever since Franchon Cruz came back after a long hiatus, just like Savannah Marshall, and how she's still not in the ring still. Since a few days ago when Franchon Cruz defeated Katawi Ortiz by a controversial decision that should have never made her win the fight, and why Glenn Feldman gave 98-92 for Franchon. Even John McHale, with an I, Mackay, whatever the friggin' judge's name is, gave it a 95 even. Tom Schreck gave it 96-94 by majority decision. Franchon won. I had the scores 90. You have no idea. I can't even breathe right now. I had it 7 rounds to 3 favoring Katawi Ortiz to win. Don't get me wrong, Katawi was 4-1 at the time, so her record wasn't that much, and she hasn't boxed for a while, for over 2 years as well, so it made no sense for them to fight after that, but still controversially bad. But the reason I'm talking about that is that not because of the fight was controversial, but because the fight just had so much problems of grown women. And this is the thing I don't want to talk about. I don't want to talk about grown, big women that look like they're like women that are like it's like I'm not talking about fat women, but or it's like talking about it's almost like some of those videos in the past, like back in the 90s or so. It's like talking about those, like, so DVDs where they have those, like, I don't know what it's called. I don't know. It's like they dress up to work out or something, or it's like they do aerobics or something, or it's like you have these other like grown, like, I'm not saying that they're overweight or big. It's like my point for that is that when I'm watching the higher weight divisions of boxing, men are different. Because guys, let me explain. Us men and women are different. Us men are like this. Or sometimes we're like this, like we get a big gut coming here once in a while. We get a big gut. But for women, they're an hourglass. Makes sense? So us humans, we grow differently. It's like every time you see a man and a woman or so doing the Olympic sports of pole vaulting, where they're putting a stick and then they go over the pole. It's like, oh man, us men are so good. Look how shaped we are. And then you have one moment where a woman should have won the gold medal, but then her breast just touched the stick and it made her fail. It's like, well, man, no wonder men are better than women. I don't want to get to that. I don't want to throw out that slang term or any other dumb stuff. But yet again, I get that there's not a lot of popularity in the sport for women's sports, or even the time I talked about it. But when it comes to boxing, or even MMA or bare knuckle fighting, it's different. So guys, in bare knuckle boxing, women in bare knuckle boxing don't have a lot of weight classes ahead of them. The only weight classes you have in women's bare knuckle are as follows. They have the minimum weight, flyweight, bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, and that's it. Those are the only weight classes women's bare knuckle have. In MMA fighting, it's similar. They're not even close from doing the welterweight for the heck of it. But when it comes to professional boxing, the highest weight class is the heavyweight. So you look at that, and even though the weight differences of heavyweights are 200 pounds over, if you don't count the bridge weight, then it's 224 for us men, and so in heavyweight, but 175 pounds for women, which is fair. But when it comes to the light heavyweight and the other classes and so on, and yeah, I do question that. And the thing is, guys, during the time when Franchon Cruz and Kitawi Ortiz fought, keep this in mind. Franchon Cruz is 5'8" and Ortiz is 5'3", and she was 168 pounds. This Mexican 5'3" woman was 168 pounds. And when looking at Franchon Cruz at 166.5 at their heights, from 5'3" and 5'8" at that time, they were like Mrs. Potato Head. Their tummies were so big, it made you wonder how the environment of, like, if my father and I were watching this on TV at the time, we thought to ourselves, damn, these women are out of shape. This is not good. It's almost like the time when we talked about how women's water polo, like one time we watched an Olympic Games on TV in one restaurant that showed women's water polo. And this was around 2016 or so in the Brazilian Games. And we saw the women's water polo in USA versus some other country in one of the group tournaments before the bracket, seeing how my father was pointing out how the women were so big. Not all of them were, but seeing how their weights were different. And you watch the men's water polo, it's different. And it just goes to show you how many people and viewers are going to watch overweight women perform in boxing. Now, I don't want to offend the women and offend anyone else, or neither Clarissa Shields, because Clarissa Shields is also around that as well. Like, even though Clarissa Shields is 30 years old, she's 5'8" as well. But even though at 173.5 pounds during her last fight, which should have been a light heavyweight fight, I'll talk about that in the future in the next episode. It just goes to show you how hard it is to actually take boxing serious when you don't have a lot of tall females in boxing. Even Lonnie Daniels, the light heavyweight fighter, is 5'6.5", and her last fight, she was at 168 3/4. So the body proportions are that huge when it doesn't come to a lot of great fighters in business. Now, don't get me wrong, Chi Connealy, a female woman known as Che Aletta Connealy, 5 wins, 2 knockouts in her career, and her next fight will be in July next month. A month and a half, and she's 6 foot tall, and she was 170.25 pounds last year in her last fight. And in all fairness, her body proportion was pretty decent for her height because she was 6 foot tall, and it seemed like it was a good fit for her. Even another female boxer in the light heavyweight named Sarah Saruch from Germany is also 6 feet tall and at 173 pounds. Like, I can say that when it comes to lowering out the weight classes, I can say there's a chance to give it a shot. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. There is girls that are also basketball players. And even though there's a lot of basketball players out there that are female boxers that do go to female boxing, like Shadecia Green, the super middleweight champion in the WBO as of right now, like Vonda Ward, she was also a basketball player at her time until she went to boxing. And even Danielle Perkins that lost against Clarissa Shields 4 months ago, she was a basketball player too and went on to boxing. So there is decent types of females that play sports in their time and they switch to boxing. And it does get the proportions different. And it does make that a little bit interesting to watch. So there is some decent body proportions for some of these characters in boxing, which their body proportions are pretty good for what they are. And I'm sure them getting in shape can put out a good work for boxing. But I will talk about the division of the light heavyweight because I do question it. And I've already talked about it several months ago, but I might as well talk about it again, only to a point. And the point is, when I say to a point, I'm saying, should we get rid of another weight class in women's boxing? And I'm going to get to that next time. But for now, we're just going to wait and see what to do for now. For now. Yeah. Anyway, well. All right, guys. So the final topic I like to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, today is the World Championships. This topic I was going to say for last. So, guys, I can't stop. Guys, it's been 2 months right now since Tina Rupert defeated Samira Yamanaka, and it's like I keep talking about it over and over again, and I don't know why. It's like I'm not upset. It's just I'm disgusted. Like, even though the Shigeoka brothers lost their fights in their country against Philippine fighters, and even though Jinjiro Shigeoka did lost his last fight, which will be his last, against one of the Japanese referees that did in his country, in their homeland, and gave the win to the Philippines fighter, which is shocking. It's not like how Yudai Shigeoka had referees that were judges, like one from Australia, and one of them was from South Korea, and the other was from the country of USA, named Barry Widerman. And even though the Australian judge gave it favor for Yudai, and the other two gave it for Melvin, their first fight, and then this year they had surprising things. Like, even though there were other judges in Japan at the time, like Joseph GLOAT was living in Thailand, but he was a former born United Kingdom, and also another Thailand fighter judge that same month on March the 30th in their rematch, and another guy from the USA, and they had to judge a fight for Melvin Jerusalem in Yudai's country. Interesting. Because when you look at that, you get to show how many referees from other countries are judging fights in Japan. Just like how Kosiya Tanaka lost his second fight against Kafu Pamili for his WBO super flyweight champion last year ago, and how that fight was so close to the wire. But the judges were not Japanese judges, which was interesting. But when it comes to Tina Rupert and Samira Yamanaka saying that this fight took place in Germany, and two of the judges were from Germany and one was a Ukrainian living in Belgium, and those two German females gave it favor to their country in horrific fashion of controversy, and no one cares about it. When people don't talk about this type of stuff, I question it, and I keep making videos all the time because I don't want it to be forgotten, because people on the internet are stupider than they already are as humans, because it does question bad incompetence for a lot of people, and when people ignore it, I got to keep spitting it out. So I don't want to spit this out any more than it is, but if it's still forgotten, then I'm going to have to run it straight to the ground. And I don't know how long that's going to take. But I do want to see if they do have their great fighter in Japan, Mizuki Hiruta, 8-0. I wish her good luck to have any fight. Maybe she might go up to bantamweight. But speaking about the bantamweight division, guys, there is one thing I will say about this final topic. Because Mizuki Hiruta is moving up to bantamweight, let's just assume, while we had multiple fighters on July the 11th. So guys, on July the 11th, and I'm sure you guys haven't heard this before, maybe I haven't talked about it yet, but if I haven't, I'm going to say it now. So guys, here's the thing. We have 8 professional fights on the undercard of the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano super lightweight undisputed fight. Ellie Scottney versus Yamelith Mercado for super bantamweight titles, except the WBA, not on the line. Alicia Baumgart versus Jennifer Miranda for all undisputed super featherweight titles. Savannah Marshall versus Shadicia Green for IBF and WBO super middleweight title. It's going to bring out a little bit of interestingness there. But when it comes to the other fights for Chantel versus Jessica Camara, okay. Ramala Ali and Lila Ferratu, who knows. Not much interested in that fight. But Tam Thibault versus Mary Casamasa, that would be an interesting middleweight fight because those girls are still new in the boxing. They barely won like 2 to 5 or so fights in their time. So we'll see what happens when time goes on. But the last fight on the card that I will talk about has finally changed. Instead of IBF, WBC, and WBO and ring titles being on the line tonight or so on that day for bantamweight boxing, the scores have changed. Even for the ring title that's not on the line, Dina Thorslund versus Sharetta Metcalf is being pulled out of the fight. Well, not Metcalf. So Dina Thorslund, this undefeated woman that's already put out a lot of records in her career, and this was going to be her first time leaving her country, going to America. Well, this wasn't going to be the first time she was going to leave her country. Like, Dina Thorslund has left her country before, but she never went to North America. If that makes sense. Because, like, just keep this in mind, guys. In BoxRec, when you look up female rankings and all pound for pounds, Dina Thorslund is number 1 of the greatest pound for pound boxers of all female boxing of all time. And this blonde 31-year-old woman, 5'4", in a better good shape than Katali Ortiz, her career of winning fights are big. Like, her debut fight was in Germany, even though she did fought in Denmark her whole life. Her 4th professional fight in Germany. And her 10th professional fight was in Germany. But at that time, even after the end of 2017 in her career, by 2018 to 2024, all her fights were in Denmark. So seeing her go to America in Madison Square Garden for her first time is like AJ versus the Jarrell Miller fight. So I was questioning that maybe Sharetta Metcalf was going to pull out an upset victory. Even though Sharetta Metcalf, I can't say much about this because, yeah, Sharetta Metcalf isn't really as a top-level fighter because she's 40 years old, but not even ranked in top 10 in pound for pound. But the only thing that keeps her there is that she's IBF champion by upset victory against Mio Yoshida last year ago, which kind of does stink to see that. But then, before you know it, Dina Thorslund, as said before, she had to pull out due to pregnancy. It is bad because when you have someone that is a champion at that level of competition, it is bad. And even though this was like 5 or several days ago when it stated that, it does stink to just see that happen. Like, Dina Thorslund would have had a great, promising legend fight here, and it never happened. Which is why her opponent is going to be none other than WBA bantamweight champion, number 3 in BoxRec, Chernurka Johnson. Chernurka Johnson, nice Australian woman, beautiful face, beautiful smile, a beautiful... even though it does stink that her controversial loss against Shannon O'Connell back in 2021, when people said that was a controversial fight because they said that Chernurka won the last 2 rounds, and it said that the last 2 rounds were the wins for her, and judges had controversies for giving her opponent more rounds, which I question that. But even after her super bantamweight win the next year, and then her loss against Ellie Scottney due to the weigh-in moment where she had body paint and a beautiful thong, and then Ellie Scottney said F beauty, and she lost that fight too. Yeah, Trinurka Johnson's career just seemed like it was dead. But she went on to WBA in the bantamweight and win. And now she's taken the place for the vacant WBC and WBO titles and her WBA title on the line with IBF champion Sheretta Metcalf, which means this is not a unified championship fight for Dina Thorson and Sheretta Metcalf. This is going to be Sheretta Metcalf versus Trinurka Johnson for all the undisputed titles. Not the ring title because Dina Thorson hasn't lost yet, but yeah, that is going to be interesting. So the information might say that if Trinurka Johnson or Sheretta Metcalf, whoever wins this fight, will be undisputed, meaning that Dina Thorson is going to fight one of these fighters for undisputed, not just as her, maybe they'll say they'll give a linear weight title on the line, but maybe, just maybe, an undisputed title fight for this. So Dina Thorson can take all the time she wants to, maybe wait for pregnancy and such. We'll pray to God that she'll be okay, because she needs all the luck she can get. And because at this moment, guys, as for women in sports, that's the problem. Like, women want to continue their careers for a long time, but just like Natalie Decker, the NASCAR failure, the bust of NASCAR drivers, and how she got pregnant and she has a baby as well, that does bring out another horrible fact that you're going to have women that the odds of them getting pregnant while almost inside a race car or in sports brings out a lot of scared problems. And that's why we got to be careful for this stuff in the future. So that's the problem when it comes to women's sports, is that when it comes to the pregnancy thing and life, because that does bring a lot of scared facts for us men or myself, depending if they're the husband. So we do got to be careful for that. So we'll see what happens in the future, but all in all, I wish her best of luck. And as for this card, so yeah, the card has changed, but yet again, I'm sure this won't be a fact. It is what it is, but we'll see what happens. As for September the 13th, ladies and gentlemen, we still have the Alvarez and Crawford fight still on the line, but yet again, we don't know much about this yet. As for the July the 19th, as said before, Daniel Dubois versus Alexander Usyk was on the line. Yesterday, it said that Moses Atama was going to be involved in that show at the fight card. And it said that he was going to fight in June against someone, which might be Nelson Heisa. But, of course, nothing has been seen since. So, with everything going on, with all the rankings here and every other fighter in boxing and so on and so forth, I will see what will happen in the future time. But for now, it's probably to just wait and see what happens in the future. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching this episode. And with that being said, the Fox Wolf will say, see you next time.